The plane landed with a gentle bump at LaGuardia. Through the window, New York sprawled under a leaden October sky. I shouldn't be here. The restoration project of the historic Creole estate in the French Quarter of New Orleans was supposed to last another week, but I had finished early, driven by a silly, nostalgic urge to surprise him. To surprise Julian. "Ma'am," the flight attendant smiled. "We've arrived." I nodded, unbuckling my seatbelt. "Eleanor. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for 7 years I've been the wife of Julian Vance, a highly successful corporate lawyer, a practical man, a model citizen of the Upper East Side, and I, a heritage architect, the dreamer, the idealist who lives in a world of old stones and fantasies, as he sometimes says with that condescending smile that digs right into my ribs." I walked out of the terminal dragging my tool bag full of levels and latex gloves, along with a modest suitcase. I called home. The landline rang long into the emptiness of our Park Avenue apartment. No one answered. He was probably at the firm. Or maybe not. I stopped following the thought and caught a cab. "Coming back from a trip?" asked the driver, an older man with a thick Brooklyn accent. "Yes, from New Orleans." "Ah, the Big Easy. Everything's different down there." "Even the Stones," I smiled weakly. "Even the Stones," Julian would say. "Down there, even the Stones want to throw a parade and avoid real work." I leaned against the window, watching Fifth Avenue roll by. I felt the sudden exhaustion of the last few weeks, the struggle to save every wrought iron balcony, every original floorboard. Julian never understood. "Why do you kill yourself over that, Ellie? It's not yours." It was just a job to him. The world was divided into the useful and the useless. I clearly swam in the latter category. The taxi stopped in front of our discreet pre-war building. I paid and went up with my suitcase. As I opened the front door, silence greeted me. That particular silence of empty spaces that are nonetheless filled with a foreign presence. I left my suitcase in the foyer, and that's when I saw them. A pair of deep red Christian Louboutin stilettos, abandoned next to the living room sofa. They weren't mine. I wear low, comfortable block heels to climb scaffolding. These were high, aggressive, expensive. A sudden chill ran down my spine. I took a deep breath. "Calm down. Eleanor, he has a visitor, a client." Julian sometimes received clients at home, though rarely. He was a man of corner offices and high-end steakhouses, but it was possible. I walked without making a sound. Nothing seemed out of place. The apartment was immaculate as always. The housekeeper, Magda, came on Thursdays. But the air smelled different. Not our clean scent of fresh flowers and books, but something denser, sweeter. A heavy, seductive, invasive women's perfume, maybe Tom Ford Black Orchid. I wore Jo Malone, light, fresh. My hand started to shake. No, it couldn't be. I wasn't going to be the paranoid, snooping wife. I was going to be practical, just like he always wanted. Then I remembered the security system. We had installed indoor cameras after an attempted burglary in the adjacent building. Julian had mocked it. "Why do you want to spy on four walls?" But I insisted. I could access it from an app on my phone. I rarely used it. Now, with my heart beating in my throat, I pulled out my phone. My clumsy fingers found the Secure Home app. It asked for the password. The usual one. Our wedding date, 0914-2014. The 14th of September 2014. The day he swore before my family in New Orleans that he would protect everything I loved. A bitter taste rose in my mouth. I logged in. 4 thumbnail views. Living room, kitchen, foyer, study, Julian's study. The light was on and there was movement. I tapped the icon. The image expanded, sharp in high definition. And the world stopped. There, on the Italian leather sofa in his study, the one we picked out together at a boutique in Soho, were the two of them. Julian and a woman. I didn't recognize her at first. Rumpled clothes, urgent kisses, hands wandering where they shouldn't. My husband, with his hair disheveled, his dress shirt half open. She was brunette, her back to the camera, wearing a tight black dress that was now hitched up past her hips. A buzzing filled my ears. The blood seemed to drain from my body. I couldn't breathe. I leaned against the wall. Cold, hard, real. This wasn't a nightmare. It was my living room, my sofa, my life in high definition. And then they spoke. The microphone picked up every word. Clear. Obscene. Your little wife must still be down in NOLA counting bricks, the woman said in a husky, confident, decidedly Manhattanite voice. She pulled back a little, and I finally saw her profile. I recognized her then, Avery Sterling. I had seen her in business magazines, a real estate developer, young, ambitious, the kind that appears in Forbes's 30. Under 30, Julian had mentioned a couple of times that he was working for her. An important deal, big money. Ellie. Julian laughed, a hollow sound that pierced my chest. Ellie thinks saving a few old stones is going to change the world. She's never understood how this works, the real rules of the game. And the report? Asked Avery, toying with the collar of his shirt. Has she signed it yet? Not yet, but she will. The consultation meeting is on Wednesday. Trust me. After all, I'm her sensible husband. Someone has to teach her the rules. The report. The Wednesday meeting. Fragments of recent conversations with Julian clicked into place like pieces of a poisoned puzzle. Honey, Avery Sterling has a delicate project. An old industrial building with some heritage value. She needs an evaluation from a heritage expert. Could you take a look? It's just a formality. And I, naive and thrilled that he finally valued my work, said, Of course, my love, whatever you need. Avery leaned in and gave him a slow, possessive kiss. And afterward, when everything is ready, what do we do with the little idealist? Julian ran a hand down her back. I'll suggest a fellowship in London. A year at UCL will do her good, broaden her horizons. More than enough time for you to have the property free and clear, and for me to serve her with an uncontested divorce agreement, padded with a heavy NDA, London. Just last week he had told me about a wonderful fellowship in the UK. It would be good for you, Ellie, to get out of your bubble. I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a calculated, cold betrayal. Using my signature, my prestige, what little I had to then dispose of me like an obstacle, like a piece of old furniture in the way. Avery sat up, adjusting her dress. That was when I saw the object resting on his desk. A glazed, emerald-green terracotta tile bearing a lotus motif. An original Louis Sullivan fragment I had spent months tracking down at an auction. I kept it carefully displayed in my home study. Julian had taken it a piece of my useless's world and gifted it to his mistress as a chic paperweight. My stomach lurched. Well, at least she's useful, Avery said, standing up and walking over to Julian's desk. She picked up a dossier. Once we have her report certifying the irreversible structural failure of the Sullivan Pavilion, the Department of Buildings will have no choice but to grant the demolition permit and will build the most expensive luxury condos in Manhattan. She leafed through the pages. There were renderings of a massive glass and steel high-rise. It's almost poetic. The signature of the great heritage defender, signing the death warrant of a Louis Sullivan building. Well, a minor Sullivan, but a Sullivan nonetheless. The Sullivan Pavilion. I knew it. A semi-hidden gem in an industrial edge of the city. At risk, but salvageable. I had visited it in secret months ago, purely out of passion. It possessed unique terracotta ornamentation and archways. Julian must have seen my photos, my notes, and decided it would be my professional grave. She thinks she's doing good, Julian said, buckling his belt. His tone was mocking, but in his eyes there was something else. Contempt for her, for my ideas of community and the soul of buildings. It's endearing, like a child who believes in Santa Claus. Avery let out a laugh. Poor thing. Well, let her enjoy her illusions. A year in London will set her straight. Oh no, by then she'll be someone else's problem. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned off the phone. The darkness of the screen was a momentary relief, immediately followed by a wave of nausea so violent I had to cover my mouth and run to the guest bathroom. I vomited the airplane coffee, my hopes, the last 7 years of my life. I collapsed on the cold marble floor, shaking, tears burning my face. I wasn't sobbing out loud. I was panting silently, like a wounded animal. How much time passed there? I don't know, until a noise startled me. The apartment door closing. Footsteps, rapid heels receding down the hall. Then the elevator. They had left. The impulse was to get up, run, scream, break something, break everything. But my legs wouldn't respond. Just the uncontrollable trembling. "You are strong, Ellie," my father's voice. An architect too, a fighter. Stones withstand storms because they don't fight the wind. They let themselves be struck and they remain. I took a deep breath. The air still smelled of expensive perfume and betrayal. I got up, washed my face. In the mirror, a stranger looked back at me. Pale, with bloodshot eyes. But dry now, dry and cold. I left the bathroom. The apartment was silent, but their ghosts floated in every corner. I went to the study. The sofa was slightly out of place. On the desk, 2 half-empty glasses of red wine. I picked one up. The rim bore Avery's red lipstick mark. The other, the smudge of Julian's lips. I took them to the kitchen and washed them with meticulous, obsessive care. I dried them, put them away. Evidence. I thought distantly, as if my mind had already begun to separate from my shattered heart. I needed to get out. I couldn't stay between these walls. I grabbed my purse, my phone, and walked out into the hall. I took the stairs. I didn't want to wait for the elevator. I didn't want to be trapped. In the lobby, I ran into Thomas, the doorman. "Mrs. Vance, we weren't expecting you until next week," he said with a wide smile. "What a surprise for Mr. Vance." I forced the muscles in my face into something resembling a smile. "Yes, a surprise." I finished early. His smile faded a bit. His shrewd eyes studied me. "Are you all right, ma'am? You look very pale." "The travel." "Just tired, Luis." I looked out toward the street. "I'm going to grab a coffee at the corner." "Ah, right. Mr. Vance just left with a very elegant client. Said he had an urgent meeting." His tone was neutral, but his eyes didn't leave my face. He knew, or at least suspected. "Doormen know everything." "Yes, I imagine so," I said, and my voice sounded strangely serene. "Have a good day, Thomas." I walked out onto the street. The raw, indifferent light of the New York afternoon hit my face. I walked aimlessly until my feet took me to a discreet, old-school diner with vinyl booths and the smell of stale coffee. I sat in a corner and ordered a double black coffee. When it arrived, I took out my phone. I hesitated for a moment. Then, with fingers that no longer trembled, I reopened the security app. I accessed the stored files folder. There it was, today's video, and several others from the past few months. Dates and times. Wednesday afternoons mostly, when I usually had my university seminars or when he worked late. I downloaded them all, one by one. Then, with a methodical precision that surprised even me, I uploaded them to an encrypted cloud folder Julian didn't know about. I labeled it Foundation 1. Instead of just logging out, I routed my connection through a VPN, downloaded the files directly to my encrypted local drive, and scripted the system to overwrite the access logs. Julian would just assume the cloud storage had a glitch. "Be practical, Ellie," I told myself. "Just like he taught you." The coffee burned my tongue, but the pain anchored me to reality. I was no longer the shocked wife. I was a woman with an objective. They had made a mistake. Not one. Several. Believing I wouldn't understand the rules of the game. Believing my world of stones and dreams was weak. And the biggest one of all, underestimating stillness. The stone endures, remains silent, and one day it gives way. And when it gives way, everything comes crashing down. A cold, clinical focus settled over me. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to dismantle them piece by piece. I paid my bill and left the diner. It was time to go back home. To his house. To act. Night fell over Manhattan when I opened the door again. The lights were on. Julian was in the living room in an impeccable suit watching the news. He turned, and his face shifted from boredom to shock, and then to a poorly concealed flash of panic. "Ellie? My God, what are you doing here?" He jumped up. His eyes scanned my face, looking for something. Guilt? Perhaps? Or rage. I forced the widest smile I could muster. I ran to him theatrically and hugged him. I buried my face in his neck, and there it was, the smell of the Tom Ford perfume mixed with his cologne. A nauseating cocktail. Surprise, I said in a cheerful, girlish voice. I finished the project early and wanted to see you. He tensed in the embrace, but then relaxed, letting out a forced laugh. You leave me speechless. Why didn't you call? And ruin the surprise? No way. I pulled back, looking him in the eyes. I was playing a game now, and the rules had changed. Are you alone? I thought maybe you had invited a client over. A microspasm twitched in his eye. No, I've just been working here, bored to tears. He stepped away, heading for the kitchen. Want a glass of wine? I have an open bottle. Yes, the same one from this afternoon. No thanks. I'm exhausted. The trip. Of course, he said, pouring himself a generous glass. He needed it. You must be beat. And the project? Finished? Yes, saved. Every original floorboard. I dropped the word, watching him. He didn't blink. I'm glad, honey. Always so passionate. He took a long sip. Listen. About that report we talked about. The industrial building. Avery, the developer, is very excited. The consultation meeting is on Wednesday. Does that work for you? Excited? Sure, perfect, I said sweetly. I'm looking forward to meeting her. I've heard a lot about her. A very decisive woman. He looked at me out of the corner of his eye. Yes, she's very professional. Nothing to do with your world, honestly. Pure business. I see. The real world. You always tell me I need to come down to earth, right, Julian? He walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. His touch burned me. I just want what's best for you, Ellie. I protect you, even if you don't always see it. You protect me from your lies, from your mistress, from your plan to get rid of me. I know, I murmured, looking down. Thank you. That night in bed, he fell asleep quickly, with the heavy sleep of the guilty who believes he's gotten away with it. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. Suddenly he spoke, half asleep. Ellie, are you awake? Yes. Today at the firm, something happened. Something bad. I turned to him in the dim light. Was he going to confess? A bout of remorse? What happened, Julian? A client. A difficult guy. Threatened to take his case to another firm. His voice was sleepy, but the thread of the lie was firm. I had to make concessions. Things I'm not proud of. This world sometimes forces you to get your hands dirty to protect what you have. I remained silent. He thought it was his apology, his alibi. To me, it was his sentencing. Sometimes I said, staring at the ceiling, when someone wants to harm something you love, you have to fight, even if the rules aren't on your side, even if it seems useless. He sighed, rolling over. Don't be naive, my love. Sometimes progress requires sacrificing a few old stones. It's not worth wearing yourself out. The world keeps turning. The world keeps turning, but not on the same axis. Not for everyone. You're right, I whispered. Good night, Julian. Good night. After a while, his breathing became deep and regular. I slipped out of bed. In the dim light of the living room, I opened my laptop. The screen illuminated my cold, determined face. In the cloud, the folder Foundation one contained the beginning. There would be more. Many more. Blueprints. Emails. Bank transfers. The silent stone had begun to record every crack, every fault in his structure. I opened a new document. I wrote the first line of my own report. The real report on the fraudulent demolition project of the Sullivan Pavilion, and on the rotting foundations of a life. Outside, in the New York night, a distant police siren wailed. Inside, in the silence of my new, desolate world, there was only the soft click of the keyboard and the beating of a heart that no longer bled, but pulsed to the rhythm of a new purpose. Cold, hard, unstoppable as stone. The game had begun, and they didn't know the rules, nor did they know who the real player was. The following days were an exercise in acting that any Broadway performer would have envied. I woke up, made breakfast, kissed Julian on the cheek while he reviewed the Wall Street Journal. He returned the kiss with a distance that I would previously have interpreted as marital routine, but now recognized as the relief of a man who believes he's dodged a bullet. Everything set for Wednesday? he asked one morning without looking up from the paper. Absolutely, I replied, spreading strawberry jam on toast with a calmness that astonished even me. I've been reviewing the preliminary blueprints you sent me. It really is an interesting project. He lowered the newspaper. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, scrutinized me. Interesting? That sounds like what you say when something strikes you as an architectural horror. I smiled. A quiet, domesticated gesture. I mean, it's a challenge. And you always tell me I need to step out of my comfort zone. Focus on the future rather than the past. A wrinkle of surprise, then satisfaction, appeared on his forehead. I'm glad to hear that, Ellie. Really. He reached out and covered my hand with his. It was a large, warm hand that used to make me feel safe. Now I only felt the weight of his lie. I knew you'd eventually understand that you have to be pragmatic. Pragmatic. The favorite word of anyone who wants to destroy something beautiful. The world is full of dreamers, Julian. Someone has to keep their feet on the ground. I repeated his own phrases like a perverse mantra, and every time I did, I watched him relax, convinced that his little idealist wife had finally grown up, or rather, bowed down. Wednesday arrived with a clear, frigid sky over Manhattan. I dressed in a pearl gray pantsuit, discreet, professional, none of the colorful dresses I usually preferred. I pulled my hair into a tight bun. In the mirror, a stranger returned my gaze. A serious, efficient woman. The wife of an ambitious lawyer. The perfect accomplice. The meeting was at Julian's firm on Madison Avenue, a glass and steel building that always felt hostile to me. The receptionist, a young woman with a tense smile, led me straight to the conference room. There, Julian and Avery waited standing by a polished mahogany table. Laid out before them, with military precision, were the blueprints of the Sullivan Pavilion. When Avery saw me enter, her expression was a masterclass in false cordiality. She wore an impeccably tailored black dress, and resting on her chest was the sapphire pendant, sparkling under the cold LED lights. I noticed Julian follow her gaze, his eyes lingering on the jewel a second too long. A knot of icy rage formed in my stomach, but my smile didn't falter. Ellie. What a pleasure to finally meet you, Avery said, stepping forward with her hand extended. Her grip was firm, dominant. Julian has told me so much about you. Your passion for old stones. I took her hand. It was dry and cold. It's an honor, Miss Sterling. I've admired your work. It's very transformative. She let out a brief, metallic laugh. Oh, please, call me Avery. And yes, that is my job. Transforming the obsolete into opportunity. Like with this little challenge, she made a vague gesture toward the blueprints. We sat down. Julian took the head of the table, like a judge between two parties. Or a trafficker between two accomplices. Well, straight to the point, Julian said, opening a folder. Avery needs an evaluation from a top-tier heritage expert certifying that the Sullivan Pavilion, despite its historical value, presents irreversible structural deficiencies. That its conservation is not economically viable, and therefore, a controlled demolition is the only sensible option. He said it with the same naturalness as delivering a defense argument. There was no trace of doubt in his voice. I looked at the blueprints. I had studied them thoroughly in secret, on the nights Julian worked late. I knew the building was weakened, yes, by years of neglect, but it was far from beyond repair. With the right investment, it would be a jewel. But that wasn't the evaluation they were looking for. I understand, I said in a neutral voice. It's a shame, of course. Sullivan is Sullivan, but reality is reality. I dropped the phrase. A bait. Avery leaned forward, her eyes the color of expensive whiskey gleaming with interest. Exactly. Reality. My firm, Sterling Real Estate, is committed to the progress of New York, but we aren't savages. We want to do things right. That's why we need the best. You. Your report would pave the way for a, let's say, clean solution. Clean? I asked, feigning innocence. Julian intervened. It means that with a favorable report, the Department of Buildings will grant the demolition permit without major hurdles, and the luxury condo project can move forward with full institutional support. We could even, he added with a smug smile, include a commemorative plaque. Here stood the Sullivan Pavilion. Saved in memory. Something like that. Saved in memory. While you destroy it in reality. I had to look down to hide the flash of fury that must have crossed my eyes. In my purse, resting on my knees, my phone was doing its silent work. The recording app, disguised as a simple notes app, captured every word. A plaque, I repeated, as if considering it. That would be an appropriate gesture. But for the report, I need full access to the building. On-site inspection, materials analysis. Of course. Avery cut in with a wave of her hand. Whatever you need. My team is at your disposal. We want it to be convincing. Solid. Leaving no room for doubt. Her gaze met mine. There was no trace of the lustful woman from the video, only a predator certain of her prey. I nodded. The docile prey. I'll do what I can. Though, I added, playing my card, I must be honest. A report like this might generate some controversy in my professional circle. Some colleagues are quite purist. Julian let out a snort. Purists don't pay the bills, Ellie. And you have a career to build. This project could open a lot of doors for you. His tone was paternalistic, condescending, the same one he used when he tried to convince me to abandon a less profitable project. You're right, I sighed, feigning resignation. You always are. Well then, what's the deadline? 3 weeks, Avery said dryly. The municipal permit application is submitted on the 19th. We need your report signed and sealed before the 15th. 3 weeks, right before World Architecture Day. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. Agreed. 3 weeks. The meeting drifted into technical details. I took notes, asked questions, nodded. At one point, Julian pulled out his phone and read a message. A quick, intimate smile crossed his face before he erased it. I didn't need to look at Avery to know who it was from. She, sitting next to me, let her hand drop beside her chair. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her brush Julian's leg under the table. A brief, electric touch, full of familiarity. The knot in my stomach turned to cold steel. Hold on, I told myself. Record it all, Ellie. Oh, I almost forgot, Avery suddenly said with cloying sweetness. She reached into her designer tote bag and placed the emerald green terracotta tile right in the center of the blueprints. It's beautiful, isn't it? A gift from Julian. He said it belonged to someone who didn't appreciate its true value. I use it as a paperweight. It brings me luck in business. I looked her directly in the eyes. I saw the challenge, the barely disguised mockery. I have him, her look said. Everything that is yours is now mine. Yes, I said with a smile as cold as hers. It is very beautiful. It must hold immense sentimental value. She held my gaze a second too long, then laughed as if I'd told a joke. Julian, who hadn't caught the subtext, smiled too, relieved. Half an hour later, I left the building with a folder full of falsified documents and the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth. But in my purse, my phone held a 7-minute audio file. Foundation 2. I didn't go home. I took the subway down to the East Village, to a small coffee shop frequented by NYU students and artists where no one would know me. I ordered a coffee, sat in the most secluded corner, plugged in my earphones, and reviewed the recording. Julian's voice was clear, definitive. The report would pave the way. A clean solution. Avery's was venomous. Purists don't pay the bills, Ellie. And you have a career to build. But I needed more. I needed material proof. Documents, transfers. I needed allies. I remembered Vivian Miller. I had met her years ago at a symposium on traditional craftsmanship. She was an older woman with rough hands and a firm gaze, the last of a long line of stained glass and terracotta artisans in Queens. Her workshop, Miller Studios, had been expropriated and demolished for a massive residential project, Avery Sterling's project. Vivian had fought to the end, but lost. Her story had appeared in local papers, a small obituary for a century-old tradition. I searched for her contact in my planner, hesitating. Would she see me? Would she believe me? I dialed the number. It rang several times. Finally, a raspy voice loaded with skepticism answered. Talk to me. Miss Miller? This is Eleanor Vance. We met at the Columbia University Symposium a few years ago. I'm a heritage architect. I know who you are, the voice cut in, devoid of friendliness. The woman who defends old stones. How can I help you? If it's for another survey or one of those reports that lead to nothing, I'd appreciate you not wasting my time. It's not a survey. It's about Avery Sterling, and about the Sullivan Pavilion. A heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then a grunt. That harpy. What do you want from me? I need to speak with you in person. It's urgent. Why should I trust you? Her voice was a blade. You experts always end up on the side of the money. She was right. That was exactly what I was pretending to do. Because this time, I said, lowering my voice, the money wants me to sign the death warrant of a Louis Sullivan building, and I have no intention of doing it. I intend to ruin her. Another longer silence. Then a dry thud, like a fist hitting a wooden table. Come to the shop. The real one. Not the one they put in the tourist guides. Astoria Boulevard. This afternoon at 6. Come alone. The shop was a half-ruined storefront in an interior courtyard, hidden behind a rotting wooden door. Inside, the smell of damp clay and kilns brought back a flood of childhood memories of visiting artisans with my father. Vivian waited behind a workbench, her hands covered in dry clay. She didn't stand up. So, the famous Eleanor Vance, she said without looking up from the piece she was working on. The wife of Sterling's superstar lawyer. Exactly, I replied, keeping my distance. I didn't offer my hand. I knew it wouldn't be accepted. And what makes you think I can help you? I'm just a crazy old woman clinging to a dead trade. Because you know Avery Sterling better than anyone. Because she took something you loved away from you. And, I added, taking out my phone and cueing the recording to the exact spot. I think you'll want to hear this. Avery's voice filled the small workshop. Purists don't pay the bills, Ellie. And you have a career to build. Vivian didn't flinch, but her hands stopped over the clay. When the recording finished, she finally looked up. Her eyes, a steely gray, pierced me. And I have more, I said, putting the phone away. I have blueprints, emails, proof that they want to use my signature for a fraud, and proof that my husband and she are accomplices in everything. A slow, bitter smile spread across her wrinkled face. So the great Julian Vance is in on it too. Doesn't surprise me. Vultures usually flock together. She wiped her hands on a dirty rag. What do you want from me? Information. Anything you have on her. Her methods. I took a deep breath. I need access to her systems. Computers, emails, everything. Vivian let out a dry bark of a laugh. And why would I know about that stuff? I'm an artisan, not a hacker. But do you know someone? I pressed. Someone who can do it and is willing? She studied me for a long minute. I have a nephew, she spat the words out. Riley. He's good with computers. Too good. Got into some trouble, but he's a good kid. Except he doesn't trust anyone, and he doesn't work for free. I'm not asking for charity, I said, pulling an envelope from my purse. Inside was $5,000 in cash. Half my savings from the last few months. It's an advance. Vivian didn't even look at the envelope. Money isn't the only thing Riley wants. He wants to see them fall. All of them. The ones who think the world is theirs to buy and sell. She stood up with a groan from her joints. Come back tomorrow, same time. Bring everything you have. He doesn't like surprises. I left with a mix of hope and fear. When I got home, the apartment was dark. Julian had left a note on the counter. Last-minute meeting with a client. Don't wait up for dinner. J. He didn't sign it with I love you like before, just his initial. I took advantage of the solitude. In my study, with the door locked, I opened my laptop and began downloading the files from the shared folder Julian had set up for the Sullivan project. Altered blueprints, falsified foundation reports, even a draft of my supposed report, already written, with a blank space for my signature. It was all so crude, so arrogant, that it made me furious. They didn't even bother to hide it. I connected an external hard drive and started copying everything. The files were large. The progress bar crept, along with exasperating slowness. 10%. 15%. My ears were alert to any noise in the hall. 30%. Then I heard the key in the lock. My heart skipped a beat. Julian wasn't supposed to be back until late. Footsteps echoed in the foyer. Fast, decisive. Ellie? His voice called out. I slammed the laptop shut, but the external hard drive kept blinking. Traitorous. I didn't have time to unplug it safely. The footsteps were approaching the study. Think, Ellie. Fast. I pulled open the top drawer of the desk, grabbed an old hardcover journal, and flipped to a random page. When Julian opened the door, he found me sitting there with my head in my hands, the open journal in front of me, and the hard drive by my side, its blue light flashing like a beacon of guilt. Ellie? What are you doing sitting in the dark? He asked, flicking on the light switch. His gaze swept the room, landing on me, the journal, the hard drive. Nothing, I said, and my voice sounded hoarse, broken. I forced some tears. It wasn't hard. The tension of the last few days was right at the surface. Nothing important. He approached cautiously. Have you been crying? It's just. I made a vague gesture toward the journal. It was my personal diary from years ago. On the open page, an entry talked about my hopes of being a mother. The last visit to the fertility specialist, the word unlikely, written in shaky handwriting. Julian knew. It was our weak spot, our secret wound. His expression changed. The suspicion softened, replaced by a guilty discomfort. Oh, Ellie, he whispered, kneeling beside my chair. His hand rested on my shoulder. I shivered but didn't pull away. Don't worry about that now. We'll talk. What options? I asked, looking at him with eyes full of fake tears. Adoption? We already tried, Julian. And it's expensive. So expensive. And with my salary, I've told you not to worry about money, he said with a hint of impatience. His gaze drifted to the hard drive. And that? What are you doing? Copying old photos, I lied without blinking. From when we still had hope. I thought maybe if I looked at them. But it hurts too much. Julian nodded, convinced. The lie was believable. It fit the narrative of the fragile wife, obsessed with her grief. He stood up, rubbing his face. You shouldn't dig that up, honey. It's not healthy. His tone was distant. He was already looking for the exit. I have to make some calls. I can make you some tea? No need, I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. I'm going to bed. He nodded and left the study, closing the door behind him. I sat holding my breath until I heard the door to his office close on the other side of the hall. Then I opened the laptop. The copy was complete. 100%. I disconnected the hard drive, put it in its case, and hid it inside an empty shoebox beneath a pile of old papers. Then I opened the real notebook. On a blank page with firm handwriting, I wrote, Foundation 3. He thinks my grief is my weakness. He doesn't know it's my alibi. The next day, back at Vivian's workshop, I met Riley. He was a skinny kid with dark hair and eyes that constantly darted around, as if scanning the environment for threats or exits. He couldn't be older than 25. My aunt says you have a problem, he said without preamble, not offering a hand. And that you might have the solution, I replied, pulling out the hard drive. I need everything on Sterling Real Estate's servers. And on the computer of my husband, Julian Vance. Emails, documents, wire transfers. Riley took the drive and weighed it in his hand. And why should I do it? From the looks of it, you live in their world too. Upper East Side, expensive clothes, rich people problems. Because their world wants to destroy mine, I said, holding his gaze. And your aunt's. And a lot of other people's. And because I can pay you. The money is fine, he conceded with a shrug. But what really motivates me is watching things burn. Figuratively, of course. A quick, almost invisible smile crossed his face. What do you have so far? I showed him the audio of the meeting, the falsified documents, the altered blueprints. Riley reviewed them with an expert eye. This is amateur hour, very sloppy. But useful. He handed the drive back. For the Sterling servers, I need physical access, even just for a minute. A thumb drive in a USB port. Something. I have a meeting with her at her offices next week, I said, recalling the agenda to review progress. Perfect. Riley pulled a standard-looking USB keychain from his backpack. This isn't a flash drive. It's a remote access Trojan or RAT. Plug it in for 5 seconds and the payload installs silently. Over the next 3 days, whenever her laptop hits a Wi-Fi network, I'll siphon her data remotely, drip by drip, so it doesn't trigger bandwidth alarms. And my husband's? I asked, taking the keychain. It was heavier than normal. For that, I need something personal, something he uses every day. His phone, for instance. Just a few minutes. That was more complicated. Julian was paranoid about his phone. He never left it unattended. I'll think of something, I said. Don't think too long, Riley warned. People like them don't wait. They act. And if they suspect anything, they'll crush you like a cockroach. With apologies, ma'am. You don't have to call me ma'am. I'm Eleanor. He nodded, but didn't use my name. We agree that you'll give me the signal when you go into the meeting. I'll be close by. And Eleanor, he added from the doorway. Don't trust anyone. Not even your shadow, they don't. That night, while Julian snored beside me, I opened my phone in the dark. In the encrypted folder, now named The Foundations, there were 3 files: the video, the audio, the documents, and a 4th, new one I had created that afternoon. A list of names. At the top, 2 headings: Ollie's, enemies. Under Ollie's, I wrote, Vivian Miller, Riley, last name unknown. Then, after hesitating a moment, I added, Michael Reynolds. I had read his articles. An investigative journalist who had risked his neck exposing a real estate corruption ring in Miami. He ended up with a contempt of court charge, and upon release, largely retired. But his hatred for the system remained intact. If anyone would understand this, it would be him. Under enemies, the list was longer, more obvious. Julian. Avery. The system. My own guilt. I turned off the phone in the dark. Julian's breathing was a constant reminder of the betrayal sleeping next to me, but it no longer caused me pain. Only a cold determination. A stone purpose. They thought they were playing chess, moving pieces, sacrificing pawns. But it wasn't chess. It was an older, slower, more relentless game. It was the game of erosion, of the drop of water that, falling day after day on the exact same spot, eventually hollows out the hardest rock. And I was that drop. Silent, persistent. And they didn't even know I was falling. The air smelled of wilted roses and damp earth. The conservatory garden in Central Park, in the middle of an early October afternoon, was almost empty. I chose this place for our meeting for 2 reasons. Its labyrinthine layout offered privacy, and Mike Reynolds, according to a profile I'd read, had once written that it was the only corner of New York where he could still think. I saw him before he saw me. Sitting on a wrought iron bench beneath a bare-branched tree. He was a man in his 50s, slender, with a face lined by wrinkles that looked carved by a knife. He wore a faded leather jacket and smoked a cigarette with the urgency of someone who needs smoke to stay alive. His pale green eyes scanned every movement around him. The eyes of a man who had seen too much. Mr. Reynolds, I said, approaching. He looked up, examined me openly from head to toe, and nodded toward the empty space on the bench beside him. So, you're the star lawyer's wife. His voice was gravelly, as if the tobacco and bile had solidified in his throat. I have to tell you, your story, the way you pitched it on the phone, sounds like a soap opera. The cheated wife seeking revenge. Too sentimental. Too private. I sat down, keeping a cautious distance, and pulled out my phone. I'm not looking for revenge. I'm looking for justice. And it's not just private. It's an urban fraud that's going to destroy a protected heritage site. With the complicity of my husband, Mike took a drag of his cigarette, exhaling the smoke slowly. Real estate fraud happens every day in this city. Heritage sites get bulldozed. New York is built on rubble. Why should I care about yours? Because it wasn't just mine. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Avery's mocking smile, the disdain in Julian's voice, my mother-in-law's pendant sparkling on her chest, but I couldn't tell him that. I had to appeal to his professionalism, to his rage, to whatever had gotten him thrown in jail. Because this isn't just any fraud, I said, lowering my voice. It's a Louis Sullivan building. One of the last intact ones in the outer boroughs. And because the people involved are laughing at the system, at the law, and at the people who believe in it, I turned on my phone screen and scrolled to the audio file. I played it at a low volume, but loud enough. Julian's voice filled the space between us. Purists don't pay the bills, Ellie. Mike didn't flinch. His eyes remained fixed on a distant point where some kids were feeding ducks. But when Avery's voice came through, clear and contemptuous, those community board zealots who think every pile of bricks is a historic monument, something changed in his posture, a barely perceptible tension in his shoulders. I let the key fragment play, then paused it. It's not just corruption, it's contempt. Contempt for culture, for people, for anything that isn't their profit margin. And they are using my signature, my credibility, to do it. The journalist crushed his cigarette against the sole of his boot with meticulous care. And what do you want me to do? I haven't written a piece in years. The paper fired me after the Miami mess. And Justice. He waved a hand vaguely. Justice is blindfolded and her pockets are wide open. You haven't stopped investigating, I said confidently. I know. I've read your blog under that pseudonym. You keep uncovering small cases because you can't help it. It's who you are. For the first time, he looked directly at me. His green eyes seemed more alive, more alert. And what do I get out of this? Aside from getting mixed up with powerful people again, last time I ended up with 2 broken ribs and a contempt charge. You get an exclusive, I said, locking my gaze with his. An exclusive that could take down one of the most prominent developers in New York and a top-tier law firm. An exclusive on how technical reports are manipulated, how building inspectors are bribed, how heritage is destroyed for a few $1,000,000, and how a woman, the lawyer's wife, recorded and documented the whole thing. I paused, letting the words sink in. And you get the satisfaction of hitting them right where it hurts again. Mike remained silent for a long time. A cold wind rustled the bare rose bushes. Show me the video, he said abruptly. I hesitated. The video was the most intimate, the most painful. But it was also the most devastating proof. I found it, turned the screen, and showed him. Just 30 seconds. Enough to see the tangled bodies, to hear the laughter, the contempt. I turned the screen off. My hands were shaking slightly. He nodded once, as if something had been confirmed in his mind. All right. He lit another cigarette. But there are conditions. First, I lead the investigation. You give me everything you have, but I decide how and when it's used. Second, we don't move until we have the smoking gun. Not just gossip and salacious videos. We need paper. Wire transfers, contracts, emails. The smoking gun. Understand? I understand. And I have it. Or I will soon. I told him about Riley, the USB drive, the upcoming meeting at Sterling Real Estate. A hacker, Mike snorted. Great. Just what we need to get labeled as conspiracy nuts. But fine, times being what they are. He pulled out a worn black notebook. Give me names, dates, everything. We spent the next hour going over details. I told him about the altered blueprints, the fake report, the deadline, the 15th, the day before the city council hearing. I told him, my voice totally flat, about Julian's plan to send me to London, and the offshore account in the Cayman Islands I had glimpsed on his computer. Mike took notes in tiny, cramped handwriting. Caymans. Interesting, he muttered. A black hole for dirty money. If we can trace transfers from a U.S. account to a Cayman account, and from there to the project, that's tax fraud, money laundering, a whole festival of felonies. He looked up. Are you prepared for what comes next? When this blows up, your life is going straight to hell. Your marriage, your reputation, everything. My marriage went to hell the day he slept with her on my sofa, I said, and the coldness of my own voice surprised me. My reputation. We'll see. I prefer a reputation destroyed by the truth than one built on a lie. Mike looked at me with something that might have been respect, or just clinical curiosity. Well, let's get to work. I need raw access to the material. Copies of everything. And I need you to keep acting like nothing is wrong. Smile, sign papers, go to your little husband and wife dinners. Do you have the stamina for that? I have the stamina for whatever it takes, I replied. And it was true. Every night spent next to Julian, every fake smile, every feigned caress was one more nail in the coffin of my old life, and one more step in my determination. All right, he said, standing up with a crack of his knees. Keep me posted. And don't do anything stupid. People like them. When they feel cornered, they bite. And they bite hard. We parted ways. Leaving the park, I felt a mix of relief and terror. I was no longer alone. I had a skeptical journalist and a resentful hacker on my side. It was an army of lunatics and outcasts, but it was my army. That night, Julian got home earlier than usual. I found him in the kitchen, pouring a scotch. He looked tired, but his eyes gleamed with a light I knew well, that of a man with a plan, about to execute it. "Ellie," he said without looking at me, "we need to talk." My heart jumped. Did he know something? Had he followed me? "About what?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral as I set the table for dinner. "About London. About that fellowship. I've been making calls." He took a long sip. "It's a unique opportunity. A year at UCL with Professor Ackerman. You know him, right? He's a leading authority." "Yes, of course," I said, placing the cutlery with millimeter precision. "But Julian, I have work here. The New Orleans project just wrapped up, but other things will come along." "Exactly," he said, slapping his hand on the counter. It made me jump. Other projects, small projects, dead ends. At UCL, you could specialize, make connections. You could come back with a resume that opens doors anywhere, even back here, with a much better salary. He stepped closer, putting his hands on my shoulders. His breath smelled of scotch and mint. "Look, Ellie, I'll be blunt. This country's heritage bubble is bursting. Restoration is a luxury we can't afford right now. You have to think about the future. Our future. Our future. The future he was planning with Avery. And you?" I asked, looking directly at him. "Would you come with me?" A shadow of discomfort crossed his face. "I have the firm here, the clients. I can't just drop everything. But I'd visit often. And in a year, when you finish, we'll see. You could look for work there, or come back. We'll cross that bridge. We'll see." The empty promise of someone who has no intention of following through. "It's very sudden, Julian. I need to think about it." "There's no time to think." His voice rose, then he artificially lowered it to sound calm. "Sorry, it's just that the spot is very competitive. If we don't give an answer soon, they'll give it to someone else. And I've pulled a lot of strings. I called in favors. Favors, like the one owed to him by the Dean of Architecture, whom he had helped with an intellectual property mess years ago. He had told me about it, proudly, a long time ago. "When do you need an answer?" I asked, pouring myself a glass of water. My hands weren't shaking. "By next Friday." He moved closer, attempting an intimacy that made me nauseous. "Ellie, trust me. It's what's best for you. I'm asking you as your husband, as someone who loves you and wants what's best for you." The words, so hollow, so fake, hung in the air between us. I looked into his eyes, those gray eyes in which, for 7 years, I had believed I saw love. Now I only saw calculation and haste. The haste to be rid of me. "All right," I said, lowering my gaze. "I'll think about it. I'll give you an answer on Friday." He exhaled, visibly relieved. "Thank you. I knew you'd understand." He kissed my forehead, a gesture that used to seem tender and was now pure venom. "Now, let's talk about something else. Avery invited us to dinner at her place on Friday. An intimate dinner to celebrate the start of our collaboration." I told her yes. A dinner at her house. The perfect stage for the ratification of my submission. For the spectacle of the docile wife and the triumphant mistress. "Of course," I replied, with a smile that hurt my facial muscles. "It will be an honor." The dinner at Avery Sterling's Tribeca penthouse was a high-voltage exercise disguised as elegance. Her apartment was a showcase of cold luxury, designer furniture, abstract paintings with exorbitant price tags, and, prominently displayed in the living room, a framed sketch I recognized immediately, a study of the Sullivan Pavilion's facade. The ultimate ironic touch. Avery received us with air kisses, dressed in a haute couture outfit that made her look like a modern warrior. She was wearing the pendant, of course. "Ellie, so lovely to see you again." "Julian, come in, come in." She guided us to the living room, where a uniformed server offered champagne. "Let's toast to new beginnings." We clinked glasses. The crystalline sound reminded me of something breaking. "To new beginnings," I repeated, and drank. The champagne was excellent, and it tasted like gall. The dinner was a display of delicacies and double entendres. Avery talked about her projects, her vision for New York, the need to modernize without apologies. Julian nodded, offering flattering comments. I smiled, ate little, and listened. "And you, Ellie?" Avery asked at one point, pinning me with dagger-like eyes. "How are you handling the transition?" From pure restoration to applied practice. It must be quite a mindset shift. They both looked at me. Julian with anxiety, Avery with malicious curiosity. I set my fork down next to my plate. "It's difficult at first," I said calmly. "You cling to certain ideals, to the belief that everything has a soul, a history worth saving. But then you see reality, the budgets, the interests, the people, and you realize that clinging to an ideal is often useless, even dangerous." Julian smiled, relieved. Avery tilted her head, like a predator watching its prey move closer. A wise reflection. Ultimately, the world is moved by practical people, those who make decisions, even the hard ones. "Like the decision to send me to London?" I said suddenly, looking at Julian. "A hard decision, right, honey?" "But practical." Julian choked on his wine. "Ellie, this isn't the time." "London?" Avery asked, arching a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "A fellowship at UCL," Julian explained quickly. "An incredible opportunity for Ellie." "We're considering it." "UCL!" exclaimed Avery with feigned enthusiasm. "But that's wonderful. It's exactly what you need, Ellie. Fresh air, new perspectives. Between us, sometimes you drown in your own idealism." The look they exchanged was fleeting, but I caught it. It was the look of two conspirators watching their plan unfold perfectly. "Yes," I said, holding Avery's gaze. "Sometimes, to breathe, you have to leave the place that suffocates you. Even if it's the place you thought you belonged." There was an uncomfortable silence. Then Avery laughed, a dry, cutting sound. "Well, whatever the case, let's toast to that too." To new horizons. We toasted again. This time, the clinking of the glasses sounded to me like a funeral bell. After a while, Julian and Avery got into a technical discussion about a zoning loophole. It was my chance. "May I use the restroom?" I asked, standing up. "Of course, sweetie." "Down the hall, on the left," Avery said, without taking her eyes off Julian. I walked down the hallway, passing closed doors. The bathroom was black and gold marble, a display of opulent bad taste. But I wasn't going there. Passing what looked like an office, I saw the door was ajar. I took a quick glance. On a steel and glass desk, a laptop gleamed under the light of a desk lamp. My heart pounded. Riley's USB drive was heavy in my dress pocket. It was my chance. I slipped into the office and plugged it into the laptop's port. A tiny light blinked. But before the 5 minutes were up, I heard footsteps. Panicking, I yanked the drive out, hurried into the bathroom, closed the door, and leaned against it, taking deep breaths. Had it been enough time? I didn't know. When I returned to the living room, the atmosphere had changed. Julian looked tense. Avery, with a smile that was far too sweet, said, "Ellie dear, Julian was just telling me that you have some reservations about the pavilion report, that you're worried about your colleagues' reactions." It was a trap. Julian was looking at me, begging with his eyes for me to deny it. To follow the script. "It's natural to worry," I replied calmly. "It's a long career. But I've already told you, Julian, that I trust your judgment. If you say it's the right thing, I'll sign." Julian's smile was one of pure relief. Avery, however, didn't seem as convinced. Her shrewd eyes scanned me. It's good to have such a loyal wife. It's rare these days. The dinner ended shortly after. In the Uber back, Julian was unusually quiet. When we got home, as he was taking off his jacket, he said without looking at me, "You shouldn't have mentioned London in front of Avery. It's private." "I'm sorry," I said mechanically. "It slipped out. I was nervous." "It's fine," he said, but his tone was distant. Then, suddenly, he turned to me. "Hey, have you been using my computer?" The question caught me off guard. "Your computer?" "No, why?" "Nothing. I thought I saw it open the other day, and I got a security alert." He stepped closer, his eyes scanning my face for a lie. You haven't plugged in any weird USB drives, have you? Sometimes those things carry viruses. No, Julian. You know I don't understand that tech stuff. My voice sounded calm, but inside, panic was churning. Had I accidentally triggered a security alert? Or was he starting to suspect? All right, he nodded, but he didn't look convinced. It's just, with this project, we have to be careful. There are a lot of interested parties, people who don't want it to go forward. Like who? I asked, keeping my voice innocent. Oh, you know, environmentalists, nostalgics, people like. He cut himself off, but his look said it all. People like me. Like the woman I used to be. Don't worry, I said, placing a hand on his arm. He tensed under my touch. I'm on your side. On our side. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, his expression softened. I know, Ellie. I know. He kissed my forehead. Sorry if I've been a little abrasive. It's the pressure. This project is very important to me. To us. To you and Avery, I thought, but I nodded. I understand. Let's get some sleep. That night, while he snored, I slipped out of bed to the living room. By the moonlight filtering through the window, I texted Riley. Security alert on his laptop. Could it be your trace? The answer came back in a minute. No, I haven't touched anything yet. Careful. He might be digging. Then another message from Mike. I've been asking around. Sterling has a history. Accidental demolitions, bribing zoning officials, buried lawsuits. It all stinks. I need more, as soon as possible. I turned off the phone. Outside, New York slept. But inside me, a storm was brewing. Julian suspected, or at least smelled something off. I had to act faster. And I needed that phone. The opportunity came 2 days later. Julian had a dinner with old law school buddies. He came home late and drunk, as usually happened. I had stayed home prepping my move. When he arrived, it was past 1 a.m. He stumbled in, reeking of wine and cigar smoke. Ellie! My little wife, he shouted, throwing his jacket onto the sofa. What a night. What a crowd. I see you had a good time, I said with a forced smile, helping him take off his shoes. The best. The usual suspects. He flopped down on the couch, and a moment later, his head slumped to the side. Within seconds, he was snoring. I waited 5 minutes. Then, carefully, I approached. Julian? I called out softly. He didn't move. Julian, do you want me to help you to bed? A louder snore was his response. With slightly trembling fingers, I slid my hand into the inner pocket of his jacket. His phone was there. I pulled it out. It was locked with a passcode, but it had facial recognition. And Julian was on his back, facing the ceiling. I knelt beside him, phone in hand, my heart hammering wildly in my chest. I aligned the phone with his face. The screen lit up. A circle spun, and then his eyes opened. He looked at me, confused, for an eternal second. Then his eyes focused on the phone in my hand, my posture, my expression of frozen terror. What? What are you doing? He mumbled, his voice thick but loaded with suspicion. My mind raced. Your phone was buzzing. I thought it might be something urgent from the firm. I didn't want it to wake you. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face. His eyes, now clear and cold, locked onto me. Give me the phone. I handed it to him. He took it, checked it quickly. There were no missed calls. I must have dreamt it, I said. He didn't say anything. He looked at me, and in his eyes, there was no drunkenness, no affection, not even anger. There was something worse. Evaluation. Calculation. As if I were a hostile witness on the stand. Ellie, he said, his voice surprisingly steady. What is going on? Nothing, I said, standing up. My legs felt weak. You're tired. Let's go to bed. No. His hand clamped around my wrist. Hard. Since you got back from New Orleans, you've been weird. Quiet. And now? Snooping in my phone. What are you looking for? His grip was strong. The pain cleared my mind. I needed to pivot. What am I looking for, Julian? Proof that you're lying to me. Proof that you spend your afternoons with your client instead of at the firm. Proof that you smell different because you're wearing her perfume. The tactic was risky. Attack. Play the role of the jealous, trivial wife. His expression softened a fraction, but he didn't release my wrist. This is about jealousy? Seriously? His tone dripped with contempt. Avery is a client, Ellie. An important one. I spend a lot of time with her because the case is complicated. Nothing more. And why are you talking about sending me to London so you can spend more time with her? I let real tears of rage and fear well up in my eyes. He dropped my wrist as if it burned him. Don't start with that again. I told you, it's an opportunity for you. If you don't want it, don't take it. But don't mix up your paranoia with my work. He stood up, swaying slightly, and headed for the bedroom. At the door, he turned back. And Ellie, don't ever touch my phone again. I don't like being spied on. Understood? I nodded, unable to speak. He went in and slammed the door. I stood in the living room, shaking. I had narrowly avoided disaster. But the seed of distrust was planted. And Julian was a lawyer. His job was to doubt, to look for cracks, to find the lie. The next day, the tension was palpable. Julian spoke to me with icy politeness. I acted with wounded submission. The jealous, regretful wife. It was a delicate dance, and every misstep could be the last. That afternoon, while he was at the firm, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the housekeeper. When I opened it, I found a courier. A small, flat package. No return address. Inside was a photograph of me leaving Vivian's workshop in Queens. My blood ran cold, but I instantly knew why. 2 days ago, I had used a university library computer to query the property deed history of the Sullivan lot. I had used a VPN, but Avery's firm had aggressive digital tripwires on the property's public records. She smelled someone digging. The photo wasn't a result of long-term surveillance. It was from the private investigator she had panicked, hired 24 hours ago to scrub for threats. There was a note attached. Stop snooping. First warning. This wasn't Julian. He wouldn't use such crude methods. It was her. Avery. Or someone working for her. She had me followed. She knew about Vivian. She might know about Mike. About Riley. Leaning against the door, fighting nausea, I pulled out my phone and texted Mike. I was followed. I got an anonymous warning. A photo. The reply came instantly. Don't respond. Don't panic. It's what they do when they sense danger, but don't have proof. Stick to the plan. But be careful. Burn that photo. Burn it. Yes. I went to the kitchen, struck a match, and held the photo over the sink until it turned to black ash that washed away under the faucet. The words, however, kept burning in my mind. First warning. It wasn't an empty threat. It was a reminder. I was playing a dangerous game with people who had no limits. People who, as Mike had said, bite when they feel cornered. That night, when Julian got home, he found me wrapped in a blanket on the sofa, blankly watching a romantic comedy. He looked at me with curiosity. Everything okay? You look pale. Just a headache, I said. It was true, Julian, about last night. I'm sorry. You were right. I've been paranoid. Jealous. It's just that sometimes I feel like I'm losing myself, that I'm not the woman you thought I'd be. It was a risk appealing to his ego, to his need to feel superior, protective. It worked. His expression softened. He sat next to me on the sofa. Ellie, you don't have to be anyone but yourself. His tone was almost tender. I just want you to be happy. And sometimes, to be happy, you have to let certain things go. Ideals. Dreams. Even people. His words, meant to be comforting, were perfect poison. I nodded, resting my head on his shoulder. A gesture that used to be natural was now calculated acting. You're right. I'm going to sign the report. And I'm going to go to London. A new beginning. He put his arm around me. I'm glad, Ellie. Truly. His voice sounded triumphant. He thought he had won. He thought I had finally come to my senses. As he held me, my eyes rested on the television screen, where characters professed eternal love. And I knew, with a cold, absolute certainty, that there was no turning back. The game had begun in earnest, and the first warning was just the opening salvo of a war only one of us was going to win. In the black reflection of the window, a stranger looked back at me. A woman with dry eyes, a firm mouth, and a heart that no longer beat for love, but for something more primitive, darker, more powerful. The need to survive, and to make those pay who thought they could break me like a piece of old pottery, without realizing they had awakened the living stone I was made of. 3 days. Only 3 days separated the present from World Architecture Day, and New York simmered in a tension only I seemed to perceive. The autumn chill was setting in, but it couldn't match the ice I carried inside. Julian continued his charade of the attentive husband, but his gray lawyer's eyes scrutinized me when he thought I wasn't looking. The anonymous warning, the burnt photo, hung between us like the echo of distant thunder. Sitting in the same East Village cafe, my hands wrapped around an already cold mug, I waited for Riley. His message had been cryptic. I have something. Not over the phone. When he arrived, he slid into the booth across from me without a greeting. His worn black backpack landed on the table with a dull thud. "Your husband is more careful than I thought," he said, lowering his voice. "He has a kick-ass firewall and activity tracking software. I haven't been able to get into his main computer, not without him knowing." A pang of disappointment, followed by relief. If Riley couldn't get in, my failed attempt with the phone hadn't left a trace. And the other thing? Sterling? A small, almost feral smile crossed his face. "That is a different story." He opened his backpack and pulled out an external hard drive, identical to the one I used. "Your little USB keychain did its job. It didn't need 5 minutes. Those few seconds on her laptop at the dinner party were enough to install the back door. That's all it took. Emails, draft contracts, accounting files, synced WhatsApp chats. Even her calendar. I took it. It felt as heavy as a brick. What's in it? Everything. But the juicy stuff is in 2 places." He opened his own laptop, plugged it in, and opened 2 folders. First, the wire transfers. There are recurring payments from Sterling Real Estate to an account in the Cayman Islands. Account ending in 4,481. Then, from that same account, payouts to a Delaware shell company, Sullivan Heritage, LLC. And from there, payments to an Ian Montgomery, a high-up official at the Department of Buildings for consulting services, which is an elegant way of saying bribes. I knew Montgomery. A guy with a politician's smile, always at ribbon cuttings. "How much over the last 2 years?" 200 grand. Riley clicked to another folder. And this is the bombshell. The draft of the purchase agreement for the lot where the Sullivan Pavilion sits, signed by Avery Sterling and the current owner, some old guy living in Florida. But look at the signature date. I looked. The date was February 15th. A month before the city had officially approved the start of the zoning variance process, a necessary prerequisite for any sale. It was illegal. It was a contract for something that legally could not yet be sold. They were so sure they'd get the demolition permit that they moved early, I murmured, stunned by their arrogance. Exactly. And there's more. Riley opened an email file. Look at this. An exchange between her and Ian Montgomery from the DOB. She writes, "Ian, I need the municipal structural report to be definitive on the collapse risk. We already discussed your percentage." He replies, "Relax. The city inspector is handled. We just need the independent expert's signature to give it weight. Your lawyer controls his wife." Your lawyer controls his wife. Julian. The trust, the complicity. It burned my eyes. "I need copies of all of this," I said, my voice hoarse. "You already have them on this drive." And in another secure location, just in case, he unplugged the drive and slid it across the table. Now, the next step. For the presentation at the plaza on World Architecture Day, I need physical access to the AV and screen control systems. 1 port. 5 minutes. Can you get someone on the inside to let me in? I thought of Carter, Avery's young assistant. She called him the errand boy with utter disdain. I had seen the look of resentment in his eyes. "I can try," I said. "But I'll need bait. Something to make him take the risk." "That's on you," Riley said, zipping his backpack. I have the payload ready. It will execute at the exact time. It will show what we want for exactly 7 minutes before they can physically pull the plug. 7 minutes of glory. Or hell, depending on how you look at it. When I returned home, the drive hidden deep in my purse, I found a surprise. Julian was there, mid-afternoon, highly unusual. And he wasn't alone. Standing by the living room window was Avery. She wore a cream pantsuit that looked fresh off the runway, talking sharply on her phone. When she saw me enter, she hung up. "Ellie, we were just talking about you," Julian said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Avery came by to drop off the final draft of the report. "So you can take one last look before signing it tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" "A day earlier than planned." "So soon?" "I thought the deadline was the 15th. "There's been a change," Avery intervened, stepping closer. Her perfume enveloped me. Suffocating. "The city council moved up the plenary session. We need your report signed and sealed by tomorrow morning. All the paperwork has to be ready." "But I haven't been able to do the full on-site inspection," I protested, seeking Julian's gaze. He avoided my eyes. "Don't worry about that," Julian said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "The city inspectors have already issued their ruling. Imminent structural failure. Your report just backs it up. Gives it the stamp of approval from a renowned expert. It's a formality. A formality. My signature, my career, reduced to a formality." "I need to read it," I said, holding out my hand. Avery handed me a leather-bound folder. I opened it. It was a 30-page document, an impeccable technical analysis, full of jargon about structural fissures, material fatigue, prohibitive rehabilitation costs. All lies. And at the end, the signature page. The signatures of a city architect and a surveyor were already there. Below them, a blank space with my name printed, Eleanor M. Vance, Heritage Architect. "It's very technical," I muttered, flipping through the pages. "Of course," Avery said. "It has to be irrefutable." Julian assured me, "You agree with everything." "Is there a problem?" The question was a challenge. Her eyes, fixed on me, dared me to refuse. To step up and ruin everything prematurely. I took a deep breath. "No. No problem. I just wanted to review the foundation data. But the municipal experts already validated it." "It's validated," Julian cut in sharply. "Sign it, Ellie, and let's stop overthinking it." The pressure was physical, a weight on my chest. Signing would be my death sentence. Not signing meant open war right now, without having all the pieces in place. Mike needed more time. Riley needed access to the venue. "All right," I said, and the word burned my tongue. "I'll sign it tomorrow morning." "Where do I need to bring it?" Avery's smile was pure triumph. "My office. At 10. And don't worry, after this you can focus on preparing for London." Julian told me you finally made the sensible decision. "Yes," I said, looking at Julian. "I made it." As soon as they left, I locked myself in my study. I was shaking with rage and helplessness. Tomorrow. I had less than 24 hours. I pulled out my phone and called Mike. "They moved it up," I said without preamble. "They need my signature tomorrow morning." "Shit," he muttered on the other end. "What are you going to do?" "Sign." "Are you crazy? If you sign, you legally validate their entire setup. If I don't sign, they'll get rid of me another way." "They already sent a warning, Mike. If I refuse now, before we have everything ready, I lose any advantage." I took a deep breath. "I'm going to sign, but not with my real signature." Silence. "What do you mean?" "My official signature, the one registered with the AIA, has a specific detail. I cross the E in a certain way, and I always include my middle initial, M. In this draft, my name is printed. Tomorrow I'll sign, but without the M and without the loop in the E, it will be a fake signature, or at least invalid. When this blows up, I can claim it was forged, that I never signed that final document. It's risky, if they notice. They won't. No one looks at those things. Only a handwriting expert. And they aren't going to hire one for something they think is under control." I waited for his response. "Do you have enough for the article yet?" "I have the transfers. The emails to the DOB official. It's good, but I need more. Something that ties your husband directly to the Cayman account, or the illegal contract, something beyond him just talking nonsense on a video. I'm working on it, I said, thinking of Riley's drive. The conversation between Avery and the official. You'll have it by the presentation. I hope so, because otherwise, however you sign it, you're going to be the scapegoat, Ellie. They'll pin the corrupt architect badge on you, and with their army of lawyers, it'll take work to even smudge them. I knew all too well. After hanging up, I opened Riley's drive. I needed to find that last nail, the one that linked Julian undeniably. And then, buried deep in a heavily encrypted folder on Avery's drive, I found it. Julian was smart. He hid the bribe funds using his firm's IOLTA, interest on lawyers' trust accounts, which are notoriously hard to audit. But he was arrogant. Riley found an encrypted email thread where Julian had accidentally forwarded the specific IOLTA routing number to Avery's shell company. The deposit amounts matched the Cayman offshore transfers to the cent. He hadn't signed a confession. He had left a definitive digital fingerprint. I printed it. The paper came out warm. It was the smoking gun. Julian wasn't just an accomplice. He was an active partner. A beneficial owner. I put the document with the others. Then I made a decision. I found Carter's number in my phone. I had saved it from the business card he gave me at the first meeting. I called. Yes? A tired young voice answered. Carter, it's Eleanor Vance. I need to see you tonight. It's urgent. It's about your boss. A loaded silence. I don't know what you're talking about. I know she called you an expendable idiot in an email to HR last month. And I know your father lost his carpentry shop because of one of her projects in Williamsburg. The information was in Riley's emails, in a derogatory thread about employees with sentimental attachments to the past. Carter's breath hitched. What do you want? To help you stop her from destroying anything else, and to screw her over in the process. I just need you to do one thing. On the day of the presentation, we met at a dive bar near his apartment in Brooklyn. He was a skinny kid with glasses and a permanently furrowed brow. He didn't offer his hand. If she finds out about this, she'll fire me. And in this market, I won't find anything for months. If you don't do this, you'll keep working for someone who despises you, I said, sliding a printed copy of the derogatory email across the table. Carter read it, his face paling with anger. What do I have to do? During the presentation tomorrow, you'll be backstage. I need you to distract the freelance AV tech Avery hired for the event. Just get him out of the booth at exactly 12:05 p.m. Tell him there's a problem with Avery's mic pack. For just 5 minutes. For what? A technician is going to install a software update. Is that all? An update? He asked skeptically. What kind of update? The kind that will show the truth about her latest project to everyone watching the live stream. I looked him in the eyes. This is your chance, Carter. To stop being the errand boy and be the one who stopped her. He hesitated, took a long sip of his beer. And if I get caught? You won't. It will be fast. And even if you do, you'll have this. I slid an envelope toward him. Inside were copies of the illegal contract, the transfers, and Michael Reynolds' phone number. If anything happens to you, call this number. He's a journalist. With this, you take her down. He took the envelope, weighing it. Why are you doing this? You're her lawyer's wife. You have everything to lose. I've already lost everything, I said, and for the first time, raw pain showed in my voice. All I have left is making sure they don't get away with it. Carter nodded slowly. He tucked the envelope inside his jacket. 12:05. The back door. 5 minutes. I can't promise more. That's all I need. Leaving the bar, the night wrapped around me, cold and expectant. I had the plan. I had the evidence. I had unstable but motivated allies. I just had to survive. The next morning, at 10 sharp, I walked into Sterling Real Estate. A knot of steel tightened in my stomach. In the boardroom, Avery and Julian were waiting alongside Sterling's chief compliance officer, a gray little man with a bored expression. On the table, the report was open to the signature page. There you are, Julian said with a tense smile. Our compliance officer is here to witness the signatures. Keep everything legal and proper. Of course, I said, sitting down. The officer explained the procedure in a monotonous voice. I nodded. Avery watched with her arms crossed. like a general accepting an enemy's surrender. "Sign here, please," the officer said, pointing to the line. I took the pen he offered. It was a heavy, cold Mont Blanc. I held it over the paper. My eyes met Julian's. In them, for a fraction of a second, I thought I saw something. A flash of doubt, something resembling pity. Then it vanished, replaced by impatience. "Sign here and please stamp your official architect's seal next to it," Avery instructed, her eyes gleaming with triumph. I took the pen. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. I signed my name perfectly, then pressed my heavy brass seal onto the paper. What they didn't know was that my seal was now effectively useless. Just hours ago, I had legally suspended my own architectural license in the state of New York, pending a fraud investigation. Any document I stamped today carried absolutely no legal weight. The pen scratched the paper with a definitive sound. The compliance officer countersigned the document and packed up his things. "Everything is in order. I'll leave the documents with you." When he was gone, Avery picked up the report, blew softly on the ink, and smiled. "Perfect. Now, the path is clear." She turned to Julian. "Do you have the operating agreement amendment for Sullivan Heritage?" "To include Ellie as a technical advisor, with that 5% we discussed." My blood froze. 5%. No one had told me about a percentage. Julian pulled out another document. "Yes, here it is. It's just a detail, Ellie. A gesture of gratitude. As a technical advisor on the project, you'll get a small percentage of the profits. For your London Fellowship Fund." It was the final nail. They weren't just using my fake signature. They were making me a financial beneficiary. If everything came to light, I wouldn't just be the sold-out expert. I would be the accomplice who profited. The rage that exploded in my chest was so white-hot, so blinding, that for a second my vision blurred. "No. You didn't tell me anything about." I managed to articulate. "A surprise," Avery said with poison sweetness. "Sign here on this line, and it's all tied up." I took the pen again. My fingers trembled. Signing this would be my definitive death sentence. But not signing would set off all the alarms right now. Mike had the agreement. He had proof Julian was the owner. Is this necessary? Julian placed a hand over mine. "Ellie, it's just a formality, to make sure everything is proper. So you're protected." Protected. The word sounded like a mockery. I looked at the two of them. Their expectant faces, sure of their victory. And then I did the only thing I could do. I signed. I let them believe they had bought my silence for 5%, knowing full well that in 24 hours, that contract would be nothing more than evidence of their own extortion. "Excellent," Avery said, gathering the document. "Well, we have a lot of work to do before the presentation, Ellie. I know it will be a historic day." Walking out of the building with Julian by my side, the world felt unreal, as if viewed through thick glass. We walked in silence to his car. As he opened the door for me, he said without looking at me, "Are you okay? You seem off." "It's the tension," I muttered, getting into the seat. It all happened very fast. He started the engine. "It's over now. It will be smooth sailing from here. You get ready for London. I'll handle the rest." I looked out the window as Manhattan rolled by. People going about their business, oblivious to the web of lies and betrayals being woven in the heart of the city. Tomorrow would be World Architecture Day, and the day when, with a little luck and a lot of cold hatred, everything would come crashing down. Suddenly, Julian's phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. He glanced at the screen, a flash of irritation crossing his face, and rejected it. It rang again. "Aren't you going to answer?" I asked. "It's an unknown number, probably spam." But on the third attempt, he cursed under his breath and answered on speaker. "Yes?" A distorted male voice came through the speakers. "Julian Vance?" "Yes. Who is this?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is what I know. I know you have an account in the Cayman Islands, ending in 4,481. I know you signed a fake consulting agreement to fund it. And I know that money comes from bribes to Department of Buildings officials for the Sullivan Pavilion deal. Ring a bell?" The color drained from Julian's face. He slammed on the brakes, and the car behind us honked wildly. "Who the hell are you?" What do you want? The voice let out a dry, metallic laugh. I don't want your money, Vance. I want you to shit your pants. To know you aren't so smart. That someone is watching you. Have a good afternoon. The call dropped. Julian sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. His breathing was erratic. Julian, what happened? I asked, feigning panic. Who was that? What came in account? He turned to me, and his look was wild. Full of panic and suspicion. Nothing. A crazy person. A goddamn lunatic. He accelerated again, driving erratically. Don't say a word about this to anyone. Understood? To anyone, Ellie, he yelled, slamming his palm against the steering wheel. I stayed silent, looking out the window, a cold, invisible smile forming on my lips. The call had been my idea, a final touch of pressure to sow panic, to cloud his judgment. Riley, using a voice modifier, had been convincing. The rest of the day, Julian was like a caged lion. He made calls behind closed doors, paced back and forth. That night, as we ate dinner in silence, his phone buzzed. A text message. He read it and turned pale. He turned it off and threw it on the sofa. Again? I asked. Nothing. Spam. But I knew what it said. Riley had showed me before sending it. Reminder. The backups are safe. Enjoy the eve of the presentation. That night, as he tossed and turned in bed, I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling. On the nightstand, the complete dossier, with the power of attorney on top, waited inside an innocuous folder. Tomorrow was the presentation, the final day of the lie. Suddenly, Julian spoke into the darkness. Ellie, whatever you do, whatever you're thinking, don't fail me. For everything we've been, it was a plea, the first and last of a man who felt the ground giving way beneath his feet. I didn't answer. I pretended to be asleep. After a while, his breathing steadied. But I knew he wasn't sleeping. Neither of us slept that night. Outside, over New York, the moon was a sharp nail in the black sky, cutting through the fabric of the night, preparing the dawn of a day that would change everything. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to mentally review every move, every piece of evidence, every word of the script, that in less than 48 hours would shatter his world into pieces and rebuild mine on foundations of true stone. The day broke with a mercilessly blue sky over New York. World Architecture Day. In any other moment of my life, it would have been a date laden with meaning, with memories of my father explaining the arches of Trinity Church to me. Today, it was just a mark on the calendar, a countdown to the end. I dressed in a navy blue pantsuit. Simple, professional. Nothing that drew attention. In the mirror, my reflection showed eyes with dark shadows, but a serene, almost expressionless face, the calm before the storm. Or, in my case, the calm while preparing the storm. Julian was already in the kitchen, drinking coffee standing up. He wore his best suit, a dark bespoke navy and a gray silk tie. He looked like a man about to win the biggest case of his life, and in a way, he was. Today is the day, he said without looking at me, adjusting his tie knot in the window's reflection. You have everything ready? Everything ready, I replied, pouring myself coffee. My hands didn't shake. Good girl. He stepped over and gave me a quick peck on the cheek. His breath smelled of coffee and mouthwash. After this, we celebrate. I'll take you to that new rooftop place you like so much. A lie. I didn't like it. He thought I did because it was expensive and had a view. I nodded. It will be perfect. The event was at noon in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. A perfect symbol. Opulent, expensive, and paid for with dirty money as the backdrop for their farce. As we left the apartment, I checked my purse for the 100th time. Inside, besides my wallet and keys, was a small thumb drive Riley had handed me that morning on the subway. It's the trigger, he had said. If something goes wrong with my remote connection, plug it into any USB port behind the projector. The program runs automatically, but only as Plan B. The idea is I do it all from the outside. The hotel lobby was buzzing with activity. Journalists, local TV cameras, guests with lanyards. At the entrance, a banner read, New Horizons for New York. Presentation of the Sullivan Pavilion Urban Regeneration Project. Sterling Real Estate in collaboration with the City of New York. Beneath it was an idyllic rendering of the glass and steel high-rise they wanted to build. Nothing of the original Sullivan remained. I walked into the main hall, a grand room with marble columns and a massive screen behind the podium. There, in the front row, I saw Vivian sitting, serious, in a simple black dress. Next to her was Mike, a DSLR camera around his neck, posing as a freelance photographer. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. He gave a barely perceptible nod. On the stage, Avery Sterling was in her element. She was chatting with a couple of city councilmen, smiling, touching one of their arms with complicity. She wore a deep red dress, a power color, an alarm color, and resting proudly on the podium in front of her was the green terracotta tile, a stolen trophy used as a prop. Nearby, Julian checked his phone with a slightly furrowed brow. The anonymous call from yesterday was still haunting him. "Ellie!" Avery saw me and approached with open arms, a display of fake warmth. "So glad you're here. Today is a great day for all of us. Especially for you. Your signature made this dream possible." I hugged her briefly, feeling the cold silk of her dress. "The credit is yours, Avery. You had the vision." She smiled, satisfied. Vision is nothing without experts like you. We'll highlight your contribution today, don't worry." She took me by the arm and guided me to the front row, to a seat with my name on it. "Sit here. You'll have the best view." I sat. To my left, an older man looking like a city bureaucrat smiled politely. To my right, an empty seat. I checked my watch. 11:55 a.m. In 10 minutes, everything would begin, or crumble. At noon sharp, the event started. A City Hall spokesperson, with the voice of a radio host, took the microphone. He spoke of progress, of modernity, of a 21st century New York. Then he handed the floor to Avery. She stepped up to the podium with the confidence of a rock star. The spotlights followed her. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends," she began with a radiant smile. "Today we aren't just presenting a real estate project. We are presenting a philosophy. The philosophy that our past, however valuable, cannot be a chain that binds us, but a stepping stone from which to leap into the future." A round of polite applause. In the audience, Vivian didn't move a muscle. Mike raised his camera and snapped a photo, but his eyes were on the giant screen behind the stage. Avery continued, rattling off numbers. Investments, job creation. She spoke of sustainability and integration into the environment. Lie after lie. Wrapped in the cellophane of corporate rhetoric. Then came the moment. But a project like this isn't sustained by good intentions alone. It is sustained by technical rigor, by the ruling of the best experts. And today, we have the honor of having one of the most prestigious heritage specialists in our country. A woman whose signature validates the technical necessity, the absolute imperative, of this transformation. I present to you, heritage architect Eleanor Vance. A spotlight blinded me. I stood up, smiling weakly, and climbed the few steps to the stage. As I passed Julian, who was standing near the curtains, our eyes met. In his, there was a warning. Don't fail me. In mine, I hope, there was only the serenity of an actress who had already memorized her lines. I stood behind a podium with a microphone. The giant screen behind me now showed the cover of my report, my name in huge letters. I took a deep breath. I looked at the audience. I saw Vivian. I saw Mike. Journalists taking notes. City councilman nodding. And then I broke the script. "Thank you, Avery. And thank you all for being here," I said, my amplified voice ringing clear and firm through the hall. Indeed, my name is on that report. And indeed, as you have heard, it supposedly validates the demolition of the Sullivan Pavilion to build this. I pointed to the rendering of the glass skyscraper. But there is a problem. A murmur rippled through the room. Julian, at the edge of the stage, stiffened. Avery, beside me, maintained her smile, but her eyes narrowed. "The problem," I continued, lowering my voice a little, forcing the audience to listen closely, "is that the report you are holding is legally void. At 8 a.m. today, I filed a formal whistleblower fraud notification with the AIA Ethics Committee and the City Council. By federal law, any document bearing my architectural seal related to this project is now under a legal freeze pending a federal probe. Presenting that document to the city council today isn't just a lie, it's federal wire fraud. The murmur escalated into a commotion. Journalists stopped taking notes and looked up. A local news TV camera pivoted to focus entirely on me, Ellie. Julian took a step forward, a forced smile plastered on his face. I think nerves are playing a trick on you. Of course it's your report. We reviewed it together. We reviewed it, Julian. I turned to him, speaking directly into the microphone. What we reviewed were the plans for me to sign a document that you and Avery had already written. A document declaring me the building in imminent ruin when, with the proper investment, it is perfectly salvageable. A building that, by the way, you purchased illegally through a shell company in Delaware, a month before the city authorized its variance process. Absolute silence. Then, chaos erupted. Avery lunged toward me, but a city aide held her back. She's lying. She's crazy, she screamed, but without a microphone. Her voice was lost in the uproar. Julian closed the distance to me, pale with rage. Shut up. Shut up right now. Or what, Julian? I asked, not stepping back. Or you'll send me to London? Or you'll write up a fake consulting agreement for your mistress so you can funnel your bribe money directly to the Cayman Islands? His eyes widened in shock. The mention of the Cayman account, the detail only he and Avery knew, made him realize this wasn't an outburst. It was a premeditated strike. At that exact moment, the image of the report on the giant screen was abruptly replaced. It was the video. My video. In high definition, with crystal clear audio. There they were, on our sofa, kissing. And then the audio. Ellie thinks saving a few old stones is going to change the world. She's never understood how this works. The real rules of the game. Avery let out a piercing shriek. Cut that! Cut the feed! But it was too late. Riley had done his job. The screen split in two. On the left, the video played on a loop. On the right, documents. The illegal purchase contract. The wire transfers to the Caymans. Julian's consulting agreement with Avery. And to top it off, the emails. Ian, I need the municipal structural report to be definitive. We already discussed your percentage. The hall was a boiling cauldron. Journalists were shouting. Council members were trying to scurry out. Cameras panned frantically between the screen and the blood-drained faces of Julian and Avery. The live stream had turned into a reality show of municipal corruption. Julian lunged toward the tech booth at the back of the room, but two confused security guards blocked his path. It's a setup! It's all fake! He roared, but no one was listening to him. Then, from the audience, a raspy, clear voice rose above the din. It was Vivian. She had stood up. I can confirm it all, she yelled. And somehow, her old woman's voice, used to speaking over the roar of a kiln, cut through the noise. That woman, Avery Sterling, took my family's workshop using the exact same legal tricks. And that man, her lawyer, made it happen. It was the missing spark. Mike pushed his way to the front with his camera and started shouting direct questions at the Department of Buildings official who was trying to slip away. Did you know about the bribes to Ian Montgomery? How was an illegal sale authorized? On the screen, the succession of documents continued. Now it showed bank statements from the Cayman account with Julian Vance's name clearly visible. And then the cherry on top. A scanned photo of the report I signed, with a red circle around my signature. Next to it, my real signature registered with the AIA. The difference was stark. No middle initial, no loop in the E. A synthetic but clear voiceover explained. The architect's seal on this document was applied after a formal whistleblower fraud notification was filed. This document is under a federal legal freeze, and its submission constitutes fraud. It was all happening in a matter of minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Julian was no longer shouting. He stood perfectly still, staring at the screen where his life was disintegrating into scanned PDFs. Avery, on the other hand, was fighting like a wildcat, trying to rip cables from a podium until a security guard grabbed her by the arms. I stood at the podium, quiet, observing the chaos I had unleashed. I didn't feel triumph. Just an enormous emptiness and a profound coldness. I had ceased to be Eleanor, the betrayed wife. Now, I was just the cause. The instrument of the fall. Suddenly, Julian turned to me. His eyes, filled with pure hatred, pierced right through me. He shoved past people, ignoring those trying to stop him, and planted himself in front of me. The smell of his cologne, his sweat, his fear enveloped me. "Why?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, broken. "We could have had it all, Ellie." I looked at him, and for the first time in weeks, I spoke to him without masks, without lies. "Because it all was a lie to you, Julian. And I didn't want to live in a lie anymore, or be your accomplice. I'm going to destroy you," he muttered, bringing his face close to mine. "I'll drag you through the courts." You don't have the power to destroy anyone anymore," a voice cut in beside me. It was Mike, camera hanging, a digital recorder in his hand. "Julian Vance, Mike Reynolds, investigative journalist. I have copies of everything shown here, and much more." And at this very moment, several news desks and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District are receiving the exact same package. "I suggest you call your lawyer. A different one, I mean." Julian seemed to shrink. The cold, legal reality was crashing down on him. He looked around. The security guards weren't blocking him anymore. But they were close. Watching. The politicians had vanished. Journalists formed a circle around us, microphones extended like spears. On the screen, a final message appeared in large letters. This information was provided by heritage architect Eleanor Vance. In defense of historical heritage and against urban corruption. More info at truthforthestones.org. It was the website Riley had built in one night. Everything was there. The video, the documents, the proof, a digital time bomb. The chaos was absolute, but there were no immediate handcuffs. The federal justice system doesn't move in 5 minutes. But as council members scrambled for the exits to distance themselves, the real punishment was already being delivered. Social and professional execution. In New York, that was worse than death. Mike raised his digital recorder, his voice booming over the uproar. "Julian Vance, Avery Sterling." Copies of these files, along with the complete mirror of Sterling real estate servers, were delivered to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the SEC at 8 a.m. this morning. The subpoenas and asset freezes are already being drafted. Julian didn't even protest. He stood perfectly still, his eyes locked on the screen, realizing that his career, his firm, and his freedom were entirely gone. The actual FBI raid on their offices 3 weeks later would just be a formality. His eyes never left me. There was no hatred left, just a void even greater than mine. Avery fought to the very end. "This is a setup. That bitch made this all up because her husband is screwing me," she shrieked, her voice cracking in panic. Her screams echoed wildly as security guards firmly escorted her off the stage and down the marble hallway. And just like that, amid flashes and shouted questions, they took them away. The event was over. The great day had become the day of their ruin. The journalists descended on me. "Eleanor, how did you discover the fraud? Did you know your husband and Avery Sterling were lovers? Do you fear retaliation?" Mike and Vivian stepped to my sides, forming a barrier. "No questions right now," Mike said with his veteran journalist voice that commanded respect. "Miss Vance will make a statement at a later time. Leave her alone for now." Between the two of them, they cleared a path for me through the crowd. We exited the hotel into the blinding light of Fifth Avenue. The crisp autumn air hit my face. All around me, the life of New York continued on its course. Taxis, tourists, the constant hum of the city. It was like waking from a nightmare into a world that hadn't noticed a thing. "Where do you want to go?" Vivian asked, placing a calloused hand on my arm. "Home," I said. But the word meant nothing anymore. The Park Avenue apartment was no longer my home. "No. Any hotel." "I'll walk you," Mike said. "And tomorrow, if you want, we'll do a press conference." "You control the narrative now. You're the hero, not the victim. You're the whistleblower." "Hero." The word rang hollow. "I just did what I had to do." "Few people do," Vivian said with a nod. "My shop won't come back. But at least that harpy won't put her dirty hands on another historic building." "That's something." We parted ways in the plaza. Mike got me a room in a discreet boutique hotel downtown. When I closed the hotel room door, the silence enveloped me. Crushing. For the first time in hours, in days, in weeks, I was alone. Completely alone. I fell onto the bed, lacking the strength to even take off my shoes. The muted television was already broadcasting the news. Footage of the chaos at the Plaza Hotel, Julian and Avery being let out. My face at the podium. Massive real estate corruption scandal hits NYC, the ticker read. Prominent developer and top lawyer arrested. I turned off the TV. The silence returned. I pulled out my phone. I had dozens of missed calls. Unknown numbers, contacts from the AIA, old friends, and one text message from Julian, sent right before they took his phone. It just said, "I hope it was worth it." I didn't answer. I deleted it. Then I wrote a text to Riley. "Thank you. It worked." The reply was almost immediate. "The site has 500K hits in an hour." It crashed twice. I had to upgrade the servers. Enjoy your fame. It wasn't fame I wanted. It was peace. It was the certainty of never having to pretend again. I looked out the window. New York sprawled out. Massive. Indifferent. In some precinct, Julian was giving a statement, or staying silent and asking for a lawyer. Avery was screaming, threatening, trying to buy her way out. But this time, she couldn't. They had the proof. They had the video. They had the documents. And they had my testimony. I took off my shoes, lay down on the bed, and closed my eyes. I couldn't sleep. Images raced through my mind. Julian's smile when I told him I would sign. The disdain in Avery's voice. The sparkle of my pendant on her chest. Vivian's face when she shouted her truth. The look of absolute panic in Julian's eyes when the Cayman account appeared on the giant screen. And then, from deep within, came something I didn't expect. A sob. Just one. Dry. Tearing. And then the tears. A silent crying. The kind that makes no noise but shakes your entire body. I cried for the 7 years of lies. I cried for the naive woman I used to be. I cried for the love I thought I had, which never existed. I cried for the betrayal, the humiliation, the pain of having built my life on sand. But also, amid the tears, I felt something else. A release. A massive weight lifting from my shoulders. I didn't have to act anymore. I didn't have to smile. I didn't have to live in a house of lies. When dawn broke, exhausted but with an unusually clear mind, I opened my laptop. I booked a plane ticket. One way, New York to New Orleans. For that very afternoon, then I opened a new document. On the first line I wrote, "Restoration Master Plan for the Louis Sullivan Textile Pavilion. Lead Architect, Eleanor Vance." It was time to return to my stones. To my true stones. To rebuild something that, this time, would have solid foundations. Foundations of truth, of pain, of cold rage, turned into purpose. Foundations of living stone. 6 months later, the smell of chicory coffee and damp Spanish moss welcomed me like an ancient embrace. New Orleans, a place that had always felt like both an escape and a homecoming. The shotgun house I rented in the Bywater was small, filled with light, and didn't smell of foreign perfume or lies. Only coffee, books, and sometimes, when I opened the windows wide, the promise of the Mississippi River. The first month had been a blur. Journalists knocking on my door, offers for interviews, letters of support from colleagues, and hate mail from people who believed I had destroyed a good man. I called them the Abyss letters and kept them in a box, in case I ever needed a reminder of what I had fought against. Mike handled most of the media. He had returned to the front lines of investigative journalism with a series of articles that gutted the entire corruption network. Ian Montgomery, the implicated DOB official, had sung like a canary. Julian and Avery were in federal custody awaiting trial, denied bail. Julian's prestigious law firm, terrified of the PR nightmare, had officially severed ties with him before he even made it out of the precinct that first day. The case was too big, the evidence too overwhelming. As for my makeshift army of allies, Mike made sure Carter's name was kept entirely out of the press, and I wrote the kid a quiet, glowing recommendation that landed him a job at a much better firm. And Riley? When I tried to wire him the remaining $5,000 of his fee, the transaction bounced back with a cryptic, encrypted text. "Consider it a professional courtesy. Enjoy the jazz." I never heard from him again. One warm spring afternoon, sitting on the porch of my new house, I received a visit from Vivian. She had come down to Louisiana to visit a niece and wanted to see me. She carried a package wrapped in brown craft paper. "For your new office," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead with a handkerchief. "Something with roots." Inside was a terracotta tile. It wasn't just any tile. It was custom-fired, deep blue and creamy white, with the drawing of a live oak tree on the front. On the back, a hand-carved inscription made before firing. "For Eleanor, where there are roots, there is a future." "Vivian, it's beautiful," I said with a lump in my throat. "It'll be more beautiful to see what you do with it," she said, sitting down with a groan from her joints. "And the pavilion? What's happening with it?" "It's under the protection of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. The illegal commisses, in trust with anonymous donations which started pouring in after the scandal broke has been set up for its restoration." I smiled. "I'm going to present the real project this time." "Good girl," she nodded, satisfied. "And the other matter? Have you heard anything?" I knew what she meant. Julian. His lawyer, some bargain bin attorney he managed to scrape together, since his main assets were frozen, contacted me a month ago. He offered an uncontested divorce, letting me keep the apartment and whatever assets weren't seized by the feds. In return, he wanted me to sign a strict non-disclosure agreement and stop speaking to the press before the trial, hoping to salvage what little public sympathy Julian had left. And I told him my attorney would see him in court and that I would testify at the federal trial without hesitation. My voice sounded calm, firm. "There's no negotiation, Vivian." He chose his path. She nodded, giving me a hard look of approval. The kind that was worth more than any praise. "That's how you speak. Weakness is forgiven once. Stupidity, never." Shortly after, with the money from the divorce settlement advance, a nominal sum I accepted just to cut all financial ties quickly, and a small grant from a National Heritage Foundation, I rented a storefront in the Lower Garden District. It was an old space with exposed brick walls and wooden beams. I named it Foundations. The brass plaque was simple, and in the entryway, Vivian's terracotta tile held the place of honor. My first partner was Marcus, a young, brilliant local architect with bulletproof ethics. He had followed the case and tracked me down. "I don't want to work with anyone who doesn't have clean hands and the stomach for a fight," he told me in his interview. We hired an intern, Lily, fresh out of Tulane's architecture school, with an enthusiasm that felt like a burst of sunlight. The first project was, naturally, the Sullivan Pavilion. Despite our office being in New Orleans, the newly formed New York Preservation Trust explicitly requested me as the lead architect. I spent months flying back and forth, coordinating with local NY contractors, but the heart of the design happened right here in the Bywater. We presented the preliminary design. It was a pitched battle in committee. But we had public opinion on our side. Mike publishing articles that kept the flame alive, and irrefutable proof that the building could be saved. Viv1. The day we were notified of the permit, Marcus popped a bottle of cheap champagne and we toasted. I only touched the rim of the glass to my lips. The triumph tasted bittersweet. It tasted of solitude, until David arrived. I met him at a symposium on natural light in Creole architecture at the Cabildo. He was one of the speakers. A professor of architectural history at Columbia University, his lecture was passionate, full of erudition, but also a poetic sensitivity that struck me right in the chest. He spoke of historical architects not as untouchable geniuses, but as people in dialogue with stone, listening to nature. Afterward, at the reception, he approached me. He was tall, with brown hair showing premature silver at the temples, and warm brown eyes that looked at me with kind curiosity. "Eleanor Vance, right?" he asked, with a distinctly New York accent that, for the first time in months, didn't make me cringe inside. "The same," I nodded. "I wanted to thank you," he said, and his smile was genuine, without a trace of the pity or morbid curiosity I saw in other looks. "Me? Why?" "For your presentation on restoration materials." It was the most lucid of the afternoon. He lowered his voice slightly. "And because, without wanting to be intrusive, I followed your case. The New York scandal. I wanted to tell you I thought it was an act of architectural bravery. Architectural. Not feminine, not reckless. Architectural, as if my actions were part of a greater order, a law of structural balance." "Thank you," I said, and the gratitude was genuine. It was more a survival instinct than anything else. Sometimes they are the exact same thing, he replied. Then, after a comfortable silence, he added, "Would you mind if I asked a professional question? About the use of hydraulic lime in humid climates?" We talked for an hour. About load balancing, light filtering, the stubbornness of institutions. It was easy. Natural. When he said goodbye, he gave me his card. "If you're ever in New York, or need to consult the Columbia Archives, we have documentation on 19th century builds that isn't digitized yet." I didn't give him my card, I didn't have them yet, but I gave him my email. That night, for the first time since the scandal, I sat down to write an email to a man who wasn't my lawyer or a journalist. It was a technical email about bibliography. He responded, equally technical, but adding at the end, "I hope New Orleans is treating you well. It's a city that heals. If you let it." We started writing to each other. Emails that shifted from the professional to the personal, with a smoothness that scared me. We talked about books, music, how hard it was to find good coffee outside of our respective cities. He didn't ask questions about Julian. He didn't mention the case. He talked to me as if I were just Eleanor, the architect, and little by little I began to feel I could go back to being just that. 3 months later, he invited me to give a guest lecture at his department. I went. Taking the flight up to JFK with a knot of nerves in my stomach was an experience. New York welcomed me with its immense sky and brisk air. Seeing him waiting in the terminal, wearing a sport coat and a slightly shy smile, the knot untied itself. The lecture was a success. Afterward, we had dinner at a small bistro in the West Village, far from the places I used to frequent with Julian. The conversation flowed. At one point, he told me about his divorce. Years ago, she wanted a life I couldn't give her. More glitter, less archival dust. He said it without resentment, with a serene sadness. "And you?" he asked delicately. "Have you been able to leave the dust of the other guy behind?" "It still gets in my eyes sometimes," I confessed. "But it doesn't blind me anymore." He nodded and changed the subject. It was a gesture of enormous grace. From then on, we saw each other more. He came to New Orleans on weekends, using the excuse of researching at the Tulane archives. I went to New York for work meetings. We never went near the Upper East Side. We walked through Brooklyn, the Village, places I had never walked with Julian. The map of New York slowly began to rewrite itself in my mind, free of pain. The trial against Julian and Avery arrived almost a year after the scandal. I had to testify. Mike and Vivian were in the courtroom. Walking in, I crossed paths with Julian in the hallway. He wore a suit, but it hung on him as if he had lost a lot of weight. His look when he saw me was a well of something undefinable. Hatred, perhaps, but mostly absolute defeat. We didn't say anything. I walked past. I testified calmly. I told them everything. The blueprints, the forgery, the Cayman account. When the federal prosecutor showed the IOLTA routing emails, the ones tying his firm to Avery's shell company, I had to pause. I looked at Julian. He had his head down. His defense attorney tried to discredit me, painting me as a bitter, jealous wife. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the transfers, the illegal contract, and Ian Montgomery's testimony corroborating it all. When I stepped off the stand, I felt lighter. As if I had dropped the final burden of that life in that courtroom. The sentencing came a month later. Julian Vance. 5 years in federal prison for bribery, fraud, forgery, and money laundering. Furthermore, he was permanently disbarred. Avery Sterling. 8 years for the same crimes, plus several more for wire fraud and corporate malfeasance. Her company was bankrupt, its assets seized. Mike called to give me the news. "It's a good sentence." "Exemplary," he said. "Yes," I replied. "It's just." I didn't feel joy. Just justice. A cold, mathematical justice. Like the kind that governs the stability of an arch. Every stone bears the weight it is supposed to. One crisp autumn Saturday, David came down to New Orleans. There was something different about him, a contained nervousness. After lunch, he said, "Feel like taking a walk? It's a gorgeous day." "Sure. Where to?" "Wherever you want. You're the guide." Without overthinking it, I took him to City Park, walking under the massive, ancient live oaks. We didn't talk much. We just walked. looking at the Spanish moss bathed in the golden afternoon light. The sound of a distant brass band was a soft murmur in the background. I never get tired of looking at them, I said, pointing to the sprawling branches. Every day is different. The light changes their skin. It's because nature doesn't design monuments, David said, following my gaze. It designs organisms that grow, that breathe with the light. I liked that he said that. I liked that he understood. We sat on a park bench. Eleanor, he said after a silence, I've requested a leave of absence from the university. There's an open chair for architectural history at Tulane. I applied for it. My heart did a flip. I looked at him. Seriously? Seriously. New York is my city, but it's gotten a little empty. He made a sweeping gesture that encompassed the park, the city. Down here, things seem to make more sense. More future, or at least a future I'd like to be part of. His gaze was open, hopeful, but without pressure. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was a confession. A man putting his cards on the table. No tricks. No hidden agendas. David. I started. Then stopped. The old, familiar fear gripped my throat. The fear of trusting. Of laying the foundations of something on another person again. He seemed to understand. He took my hand. It wasn't a possessive grip. It was a soft touch. An offering. You don't have to say anything or decide anything. I just wanted you to know I'm going to be here, in New Orleans, for a while. And I'd like to see you. Whenever you want. However you want. The simple, honest words dismantled my defenses faster than any grand speech. I would like that, I managed to say. And a shy smile broke through on my face. A lot. He smiled, and it was as if the afternoon sun reflected in his eyes. Well then, simple as that. We sat in silence, watching the light shift through the moss. Suddenly, a little girl of about 7 or 8 let go of her mother's hand and ran toward us. She pointed at me. "Mommy, look!" she said, her voice clear and full of childhood certainty. "It's the lady from TV, the one who saved the old house." Her mother, embarrassed, tried to quiet her. "Hush, honey. Don't point." But the girl didn't flinch. She looked right at me. "My grandpa likes old houses. He says they have stories." I crouched down to her eye level. "Your grandpa is right, and stories have to be taken care of, don't they?" She nodded, very serious. "Yeah, just like grandpa's." Her mother, wearing an apologetic smile, took her hand and led her away. The little girl looked back at me one last time and winked. I froze. Then a genuine free laugh bubbled up from my chest. David laughed beside me. "You've become a fairy tale character," he said. "I prefer that to being a true crime character," I replied, wiping away a tear of laughter. At dusk, we were walking back toward the lower garden district. We passed by Foundations. The office lights were still on. Marcus and Lily were working late, hunched over blueprints for a new project, an old warehouse in the Marigny. "Shall we go in?" I asked David. "Sure." Seeing me, Lily looked up, beaming. "Ellie, look!" We solved the roof problem on the main structure. Marcus had a brilliant idea. I walked over to the drafting table. Marcus passionately explained his solution. David stood off to the side, observing, listening. He didn't try to impose his opinion. Only at the end did he say, "It's an elegant solution. Very Sullivan-esque, actually. Playing with form to follow function." Marcus looked at him, surprised, then nodded with respect. "Exactly." Right then, my phone rang. It was Mike. "Ellie. Sorry to bother you this late. I just got a tip. There's a case in Boston. A developer wants to knock down a 19th century brownstone block by bribing the zoning board. It has all the hallmarks. Are you interested? I need someone to take a quick technical look at it. Before, a call like that would have plunged me into anxiety. Now, I looked around. At Marcus and Lily, absorbed in their blueprints. At David, who was watching me with an understanding smile. At Vivian's terracotta tile, glowing warmly under the light. And outside, through the glass, at the silhouette of New Orleans, at its living stones, its history, waiting to be defended. "Send me everything you have, Mike," I said, my voice unwavering. "The stone doesn't fight." But we do. I hung up. David stepped closer. "Problems?" "Opportunities," I corrected. And I surprised myself by believing it. "Do you mind if I stay a little longer? I need to review some documents." "I can help," he said, taking off his jacket. "If you give me something to do, I can read cadastral maps, I promise." And so, in the quiet of the New Orleans night, surrounded by reclaimed stone, by new friends, by a future that was slowly being built, word by word, blueprint by blueprint, I got to work. It wasn't a standard happy ending. It was something better. An honest beginning, with its foundations, this time, firmly set upon the solid rock of truth, of memory, and of a peace that, like the light hitting the branches of a live oak, had taken an eternity to arrive. But now that it was here, it illuminated everything.